Welcome back for another week of hobbying. This week we are going to learn how to paint the rugged skin of these Armageddon orcs, but we are going to paint it in a highly realistic way. Just remember, I am Muriel Miniatures and this is the Jazz Studio, your home for painting tips. Alright, now that we've seen the colors, let's explain why we chose those specific colors. We are going to use some skin tone palettes that I want to be very desaturated, focusing on tones that are quite realistic. For this process, we've chosen some muted camouflage green shades, then added a bit of lemon yellow to give it that special touch. And then for the areas of skin that change tone, we've gone with some rich purplish hues, reaching some very desaturated pinkish colors. Not much, but effective. We're marking out the light areas a bit. This is simply a preliminary sketch, very much like the ones I usually do, so I can clearly show you exactly where the light areas would be placed. As we can see here, there is the chin area, the hands and various other skin areas where we are going to use this other specific type of tone. So with that in mind, let us get started on the process. Alright, first we start by applying a base layer of camouflage green mixed with this dirty brown. Why do we do this? To give it that rich, dark and earthy foundation we want, with subtle touches of organic green. We will gradually build up the layers with olive, or incorporate a bright touch of highlight with lemon, but this layer serves as our primary base. If we want to make our skin textures look truly natural, organic and realistic, those organic tones are actually just subtle and slightly desaturated tones. It's incredibly uncommon to see an animal in nature with vividly colored skin, except for some specific types of frogs, for example. But that's almost always a clear warning sign. We'll go ahead and apply this tone to about 90% of the miniature, even in areas where we'll later paint it a more pinkish shade, because that way it already serves as a base for us. We'll have that subtle highlight completely finished and the placement of the lights already established. As I said before, we're going to cover roughly 90% or so of everything from the previous step, but we'll begin the process of carefully creating a bit of texture. Now, you might ask, how exactly do we create texture, David? Well, we do it with stippling and many fine intricate lines to give this skin not the feeling of perfectly smooth, clean and beautiful skin, but rather the sense of incredibly tough, thick and weathered rough skin, which is exactly what I think perfectly aligns with the rugged skin of an orc. We start this process by focusing on the mid-tone values, which is the easiest way for us to approach it, and then we gradually build up that texture layer by layer until it is complete. My intention is not to spend the whole 30-minute video talking, because I think it's unnecessary since you can see it for yourself. It's much clearer than listening to me explain step by step what we're doing. As you can clearly see, I haven't fully attached the head just yet, so that's something that will be quite useful later on when working a bit more with the airbrush, so we won't have to fill and mask some of those tricky areas. Always keep the fundamental concept of volume in mind at all times, okay? Carefully identify the specific areas, identify the cylinders, identify the circles, rectangles, and so on. And then systematically apply the volume based on that particular geometric shape, the overall surface area, and the exact direction from which the light is currently coming, obviously. We consistently increase the tone, we keep contributing a bit more significant value to the area, and we do it in a very deliberate and gradual manner. Why do we do it in such a gradual way? That is to say, by adding and establishing a series of gradual transitions in tone, because we do not want it to become more challenging for us to manage later in the process. If we have a large difference in the gradient in terms of value, it would be much harder to blend. So we want to go slowly layer by layer to develop a texture for this skin. If we decided to skip over these steps, in the end we would have to do a lot of correcting. It would be much more difficult and complicated for us. And I really don't think the final result would be optimal. Whereas doing it this way, working carefully layer by layer and step by step, is truly the best way to create the specific texture we want to achieve on the skin of this orc character. Alright, at this particular stage, we can already clearly start to see a good bit of the orc's volume taking shape. It is certainly true that it might look a little bit messy and perhaps even a bit erratic right now, but don't worry about that too much, because in the very next step we are going to make everything look much more cohesive and well defined. It is crucial to remember that at this stage, you must start reducing the highlighted areas to build up the three-dimensional volume, because if we leave everything as it is, in each subsequent step we will just end up painting over everything, but with a much lighter tone. In the end, it just stays flat for me. Make sure to really focus on and keep in mind the physical volume of the individual muscles. Since the individual muscle fibers themselves naturally have significantly different volumes, you can spend a good amount of time carefully observing them. You might even want to take some detailed reference from a professional bodybuilder or a high-quality anatomical image you find online to get a much clearer idea and work on your project in that specific way. It is always beneficial to utilize references. Doing so will lead to significantly fewer errors in the long run. Almost all painters end up working with references unless it's something we've already practiced a lot. But as a general rule, the best thing we can do is work with references. It's not a bad thing, it's just you're following a detailed sort of instructional guide to imitate certain types of fabric and specific types of materials that, without having that reference, we might not possess the necessary knowledge, or we might not be creative enough, or have enough professional expertise to be able to faithfully recreate or reproduce them effectively. Alright, now comes the magic of the airbrush. Why are we going to use the airbrush? We're going to use the airbrush because it's the best way to clean up this skin we're creating. Was the skin bad? Didn't we want it to have texture? Yes, but with the airbrush we can smoothly blend out all the changes in the skin's surface in a much more effective way. Because afterwards, what exactly is it that we will do next? Afterwards, we'll emphasize the highlights even more than before, and that could end up creating a bit too much contrast from one area to another. This way, we blend everything together perfectly, and we'll end up with absolutely wonderful and smooth skin. We go back to the process of gradually and carefully building everything up, highlighting and defining the muscle areas, and in this way we will take a few more steps up. It is slow, it is tedious, but that is just how it is. This is the way to do it, so that it turns out like this. Alright, at this point it is worth explaining why we are using this vibrant lemon yellow. Why? Because lemon yellow is exceptionally vibrant and highly saturated. We want to effectively counteract and break up all of that dull desaturation we're creating, simply by adding it to certain specific areas. Doing this will give us much greater chromatic harmony and allow the skin tones to appear as though they have a healthy sense of natural shine and radiant liveliness. I know it might sound a bit contradictory to what I said before, but you'll see and realize that it gives the skin that touch where we understand that aside from being the dirty skin of an orc and having desaturated tones, it still has some liveliness, a bit of vibrancy. It's super important to be clear about these kinds of things. Can skin be desaturated? It can be. But if all the skin and everything else is dull and leans toward those tones, in the end it can look more like dead skin than living skin. And with this little touch of lemon, we're going to add that hint of vibrancy. Alright, with eye yellow added to the previous mix and carefully applied in almost glaze-like layers, we're going to do the final highlights. As you can see, the skin looks spectacular and vibrant. Even so, we'll do a few more things to add to the final piece. To achieve that much more realistic and lifelike touch we all like, we are adding some chromatic tones to give it the deep richness we want for this skin. You see, skin isn't just green, it's not just red, and it's not just dark. It actually has an incredibly vast array of countless different tones due to varying blood flow speeds and several other biological factors that make the skin tones in different areas appear as entirely different colors or subtle shades. let's get to it. We are going to use this specific shade of red tone. It's a muted and slightly dirty red. You can use vermilion, bordeaux, or any variety of red that leans a bit more towards the purple or blue side of the spectrum. What are we going to do? We're going to apply it to the entirety of the facial region, such as the jawline, the lips, and various other spots. In addition to that, we'll also apply it later on to areas like the arms, the elbows, the palms of the hands, and specific areas where there might be minor wounds or irritations, or even just to slightly change the overall tone of the skin. With these two tones, we're going to create the base layer for the lips, all right? I like to differentiate the lips from the chin and so on, at least when it comes to orcs. As you can see, it leaves a reddish tone leaning towards pink. And what will we do next? To start off, we are going to start by carefully adding a bit of brown rose to create the highlighted areas. As you can clearly observe, I'm creating these highlights by adding a bit more brown rose, so it gives us the distinct impression that it's glistening and shining a little bit under the light. And to wrap everything up for the final touch, we'll add a bit of eye yellow to create the final highlights on this little orc's lip. So, by mixing these two tones, what are we going to do? We're going to start by creating the foundational base for the jaw, the upper lip, and the rest of the features for this orc. Say, as you can clearly see here, with the reddish base we've already applied, and by carefully mixing our camouflage green with the brown rose, we get this unique greenish tone. We'll add soft pinkish touches and subtle rosy tones that suit the unique look of this orc character perfectly. We will also carefully use it on the hands and various other areas to create more pronounced and realistic highlights. And honestly, the more I look at the orc, the more I like it. Let me know in the comments if you would also take him home to sleep in your bed. Alright then, jokes aside, let's continue highlighting the orc's jaw. You need to be very patient, don't rush, because this step is super important. And it's what gives the face that distinctive touch compared to the rest of the miniature. Otherwise, it would just be another green orc. We'll continue to add more brown rose to the mix to effectively highlight the areas we want to brighten up. Finally, we'll also incorporate eye yellow to attain all of those maximum highlights. With this wash, which is quite diluted, we're going to introduce some contrast to the miniature by carefully applying it from the bottom areas to give it a bit more depth and shadow. And we'll also be incorporating this violet ink, this Liquitex acrylic violet ink that I like so much because it's so matte and subdued, to add a greater sense of chromatic richness to the shadows across our orc. As you can see, it gives it a distinctive touch, which is exactly what we're looking for in the orc skin. Finally, with this extremely thin and diluted mixture, these very diluted glazes, or rather a filter, we'll apply it to some midtones and some highlights, to, as we've always said, introduce a much greater sense of chromatic richness, and give this orc a variety of distinct and subtle color tones. Well, with that, we're done. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a bit long, but I really enjoyed making it and painting these orcs. Remember that you have our tabletop close formula, designed by Gerard for painting your squads, and our coaching level, for which we've opened 2 more spots. But hurry, they go fast. See you in the next video.